Hi, I'm Warren Howard.
And I'm Mark Parry.
And welcome to Crazy Compass, the podcast for business owners, leaders and managers navigating the messy reality of leadership, especially during times of uncertainty, disruption, pressure and change. And aren't we experiencing some of that now? And if you've led people for any length of time, you'll know that leadership doesn't always feel clear and controlled. But sometimes the compass just starts spinning.
And that's really what this podcast is about, helping leaders reorientate faster, think more clearly and lead with intent when things feel uncertain. Between us, we've led businesses, built teams, managed through growth, setbacks, restructures and crises, and coached hundreds of leaders through the same challenges.
So these aren't conversations about leadership theory from a textbook. They're grounded in lived experience, real situations, practical insights, and honest reflections from leaders who've actually had to navigate the pressure and the complexity that comes with leadership. And importantly, we want to help translate those experiences into something useful for you as a leader.
So whether you're leading a business, a team, or simply trying to find clarity in a complex situation, you're in the right place.
So let's get into this episode of Crazy Compass.
I was telling Mark I don't like talking about myself.
Yeah.
But then I thought that's pretty selfish because I've learned from other people telling me their stories.
Yeah. It's more about we engage with each other here and people are listening in on our conversation.
And can Will edit me to make me sound smart? Absolutely. If I say something dumb. Amazing.
Will says that is very, very easy compared to doing Warren and I.
Yeah, because we need a lot of patching up afterwards. All right, shall we dive in, Will? All right, commencing Crazy Compass, episode number 3. Well, Mark, welcome back. I can't believe another month or so has passed since our last Crazy Compass, and here we are at episode number 3.
It is, Warren, number 3.
Number 3. And, well, we're back because we're enjoying it, but probably more importantly, Mark, we've had some really positive feedback, haven't we, about the first 2 episodes?
Yeah, we have. It seems to be resonating with people and people are enjoying the stories and the content. So, we'll go again. And today, as you know, later on, we're going to explain we've got a guest here. So not just us two today.
Not just us two. We do have a special guest and we're going to talk about that special guest shortly, but I'll let you wait to hear that. So as we have done in the past, let's recap on what we covered in episode 2, Mark. And we talked about a topic we called emotional resistance. And it's that feeling that you get when you're a leader that you know when something needs to be done, but something's holding you back. And the feedback we got from our listeners, Mark, that seemed to strike a chord.
Yeah, it has. And, particularly those 3 things that we spoke about, caring for others, caring for self, caring for business. And emotional resistance, sometimes it shows itself as avoiding difficult conversations. And we've all had some examples of that. Sometimes it's putting off a decision you know you need to make. And sometimes it's simply working longer and harder because that's easier than confronting the real issue. Now, the interesting thing is it rarely comes from a lack of care. And in fact, quite often it's the opposite.
Yeah, so true. Isn't that true? I mean, as leaders, we care deeply about our people, our team, our business. But somewhere in the middle of that, sometimes we forget to care for ourselves. And, you think of that analogy that you often hear, the oxygen mask, be the first to put the oxygen mask on because others are going to need you. So that leads to those 3 responsibilities that you mentioned, Mark. The responsibility to care for ourselves, to care for others, and to care for the business. And that leads us to today's conversation, Mark, which is finding your true north, leading with purpose. And we have a special guest today, as we alluded to earlier, who I think epitomizes that balance between purpose and care. And we're going to build on that idea in the conversation. So, Mark, over to you to introduce our special guest.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Look, it's a great pleasure today. We're joined by Naomi Frauenfelder, who's the CEO of Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. Now, I'm going to read a little bit about Naomi, but one thing I want people on this podcast who are listening to know that Naomi knows somebody who's been commentating for the Tour de France, which is a magnificent race, followed by many people around the world. And she asked me who won last night, and I asked her to think through who that might be, and she said Cadel Evans. And for those who will remember, that was 2011. So while she's good at many things, following cycling and sport perhaps isn't one of them. Naomi is the CEO of Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds. That's an organisation with a clear purpose of improving mental health and wellbeing across Australia's transport, warehousing and logistics industry. She works closely with industry, government and the board to grow the organisation's impact while navigating all the opportunities and challenges that come with leading a purpose-driven, not-for-profit organisation. Naomi, welcome to Crazy Compass.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here, Naomi.
Thanks, Warren.
And we probably should declare, shouldn't we, Naomi, that we do know each other. Mark and I know you well, predominantly because way back when you were appointed to the role of CEO at Healthy Heads, I was part of that process where I assisted in your recruitment, and Mark is currently the Deputy Chair of Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. So we know each other outside of this podcast, but there are things we want to explore with you today to help us and others understand a little bit more about your leadership journey. So let's get into it, right? You ready?
I'm ready.
Fantastic. Thank you. So let's talk about that journey you've been on. Now, I've always been interested in the idea that some people set out to become leaders and others simply find themselves stepping into leadership because the moment called from it. Looking back at your career, Naomi, what was it for you? Were you aspiring to be a leader? Was it something that came naturally to you? Or was there a calling? Or just all of a sudden you found yourself in that position?
Definitely the latter. So I found myself in that position. I wasn't setting out to be a leader, but my first job was at the Australasian Railway Association, so the peak body for rail in Australia. And my first project there was setting up what became the 𝐒𝐨𝐦𝐬𝐿 Foundation, which I went on to manage. And so I guess I was drawn to the work because it was about helping people and improving workplaces. And I really just grew with the role. It was my first job out of university. And so the role grew over time. I had a very supportive chair and board, and they sort of trained me and supported me and grew me with that role. And one day I realised, that I was the leader.
That's a wonderful story. And we'll unpack this a little bit further as we go on. But you mentioned, that helping people and so on is what drew you to the role, and you found yourself in that role. You had some good mentoring in that role and support as well, which I think, is a common thread we'll often find. Did you feel ready in the sense that you knew what to do, or did the confidence sort of build afterwards?
I think the confidence grew afterwards. I just sort of started in it, and it's one of those things, you get busy, you're doing lots of different things, and then at some point you look back and realise what you'd done. But I think, as you said the word mentor. I had the chair that I had at 𝐒𝐸 was there for the whole 9 years. And so I think having that level of support and working together and learning and growing, and it's what ultimately set me up to come to Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds as the CEO. I had almost a decade learning under someone phenomenal. And so that's really where I cut my teeth on everything: governance, finance, working with boards, leadership, presenting at conferences. So that's really what set me up to go to the next level.
When you look back, was there a moment when you thought, hey, I'm actually now a leader?
Probably not necessarily. Maybe it was when I was interviewing for Healthy Heads, because that's the time that you stop and look at what you've done, because you know you're going to have to prepare examples for an interview. So I think while I was doing it, I was just sort of doing my job, and it was when I then had to look at that 9 years and look at what we'd achieved as a foundation and start drawing together examples to be able to articulate why I could do the next job. That's probably when I started to realise that.
Such a good example. I mean, the point you made, leadership is a job, right? We're busy doing it. We don't necessarily think of it in that way. But when you have that opportunity to update your CV, be interviewed for, promotion or a new role, that's when you can stand back and reflect and perhaps answer some of those questions like I'm asking you now, to look back on it. So, because we develop and grow as leaders. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now, because I think we need to explore this a little bit further with you. Thanks.
I'm going to draw a connection to Healthy Heads briefly before I take you forward into this piece. I remember, as part of our journey on Healthy Heads, when you hear about how many people or percent of the population have a mental health issue, you go, that's not possible. But if you think of that continuum, mental health issues can sometimes be dealing with some difficulties in life that are causing you to pause and not necessarily know or think clearly about what you're going. I want you to think about that in terms of a leadership process, because we can say sometimes leaders can lose clarity. And when we hear that, we go, well, hang on, I'm always pretty sure about what I'm doing. But sometimes clarity can be a minor piece of the job. So as you develop your career and you become a leader and then you walk into Healthy Heads, you've had various parts along the way where we've had to bring a board together, bring a group of leadership together. There's been limited funds, building a brand. Has there been a time where you felt in that role where, linking back to the crazy compass, you felt the compass was spinning a bit and you're not really clear on the direction and where you want to go?
I think that you can have, being in any leadership role and the amount of it that you do alone, I think you can always then come across challenging times or circumstances where it might be more that you're questioning your own, it's not necessarily imposter syndrome, but you're questioning your own ability to get through something. But I think that's the thing with having worked at TrackSafe and Healthy Heads, is when you've got such a strong purpose, that's what you can anchor back to in terms of, you know, you could have a challenging HR issue, but you know you've got to solve it for the sake of the foundation to go forward. So it makes it bigger than you. It's not about you necessarily in your decisions. It's about what's best for the foundation. Yeah, so I think if your compass is spinning, if you've got a strong sense of purpose to anchor back to, that can help you navigate through it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, because as a leader, we might be very clear on the purpose of the organisation. We might be very clear on the overall direction and things that can be done, but we might have some parts of the team that aren't functioning and aren't clear. And then your role almost becomes second to the business. And if you think about caring for others, caring for self, caring for business, to care for the business in that instance, you've got to go back and care for the others. And your role as the leader then becomes slightly different, doesn't it? It's not necessarily about the purpose overall, but it's helping you get to the point where your team can help you deliver on the purpose.
Yes, exactly. And I've got a great coach, which I think we'll talk about later on. And she said it to me when I've had challenging situations, has said, take off your Naomi hat and put on your CEO hat.
Yeah.
For this conversation or for the next day as you navigate through this. It's not you personally, it's you and your role as CEO for the foundation. So I find that handy.
And sometimes when that's happened, because you and I have had some conversations around that, it can almost feel like you're failing as a leader and create uncertainty. And that in itself can sort of feel like the compass is spinning. But I think that's an important part of leadership. And as you said, that also then allows you to tap into resources or support that you've had, which is caring for self so that you can care for others and ultimately care for the business. And Warren, you might want to open that up a little bit more.
Thanks, Mark. And Naomi, thank you. I'm really engaged in this conversation right now. I feel like I'm in the audience as well. But let's continue with the questions. About purpose-driven leadership is our main theme here. Is there a difference between a purpose-driven organisation like Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds and, say, a more commercially oriented organisation, one that produces products and services? Is there a difference, or is it the same?
That's a great question. I think so. Between TrackSafe and Healthy Heads, I spent 12 months in a chief of staff role to a CEO. And I remember thinking when I went into it, how am I going to go with this? It's not a social impact organisation. It's not about improving mental health. But I did quickly find a purpose in terms of wanting to deliver outcomes for the organisation, forming relationships with the team members around me, and then wanting to, you know, get outcomes with them as well. So I think you can find purpose no matter what you're doing. I think it's easier and it's more clear and straightforward if you say I work for, you know, Lifeline or Beyond Blue or, you know, in the or Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds in the not-for-profit space. But I think in any role you're doing, if you've got pride in what you're doing, you'll connect to a purpose and be able to find a way to really invest in what you're doing and try to deliver for who you work for.
So well said, Naomi. In fact, it actually reminded me of a managing director whom I worked for a number of years. And good story, this one, because it relates very well to what you were saying. And I'll name him. His name is Robert Belville. He was the CEO of managing director of AMI, AAMI, the insurance company. And when I look back, I would say that he was probably one of the most influential yet humble leaders who I've worked for and with. And when there were difficult decisions to be made, particularly amongst the senior leadership group, he would always bring them back to purpose. You know, why do we as an insurance company exist? And he reminded them that it's all about relieving stress and creating peace of mind for our customers. And that brought everybody back to the table. All of any factions that existed within the group or differences of opinion were always polarised back to, actually, that is why we're here, right? So your point about make it personal, allow people to connect to it. When everyone's got that in common, then your job as leader is really then helping them come to a conclusion based on that. So there's a story I'd like to share. You, as a not-for-profit, rely on funding. Okay, there'd be many others who are involved in similar lines of work as you would relate to that. But you've recently secured a significant funding. How does growth and that new funding arrangement, how does that impact on your role as a leader going forward?
So it will mean I need to probably evolve my leadership style because we started as 2 people when we set out in 2020. And now we're 8. And as you mentioned, Warren, we received $5 million through the Australian government and the Goodman Foundation
Well done.
in the last budget over 4 years. Yes, it's amazing.
Right. Yep.
But in looking at that, it's a real scale up of the organisation because really we were a startup in 2020 and now we've grown to this level and now we're going to need to scale to get to the next phase and to deliver on that funding for the industry. So it's just going to be in terms of my leadership style is naturally very collaborative and sort of getting everyone's opinion, getting group consensus and going from there. Whereas as we get busier and bigger and bring on more people, it's probably going to need to be, I guess I'm going to need to make more difficult decisions with confidence, provide greater clarity and direction. Everyone that works for Healthy Heads is aware of why we exist and what we're trying to achieve. But yeah, in going to the next level, we're in a big stage of it's sort of an inflection point, and with growth, there's change, but there's also opportunity. So it's something I'll definitely be working on as we go through the next couple of years. Great
lesson there, isn't it? That as your organisation changes, your leadership style needs to change with it. And I like your choice of words, Naomi, evolve. If we're not evolving and we're standing still, we're going backwards. So you've got a new opportunity here that the funding has created for you, and you are stepping into a new realm in your own role and learning.
I think the thing that I like in that is funding has brought some certainty, but it's also enabled Naomi to think through as a leader that her role's going to have to change. One of the big changes I had in my career is moving from leadership of a single site to I ended up being in a business that had 7 sites across 3 states. And you pretty quickly learn, one, you're not going to be able to touch, talk and sort of know every person in the business. One of the facilities was in Western Australia, and that's not easy to get back and forth to. You can lose 3 days. So then as a leader, you've got to rely on that sense of purpose, creating clarity, but ensuring that you're managing through others. And I think, as you said, that's going to be a significant development opportunity for you in terms of your career. One of the things that we spoke about last night when we were meeting, Naomi, was I don't necessarily see a significant difference between managing a team of 1 versus managing a team of 100. It's having scalability of what you do, and it's playing to your strengths, such as being clear on the purpose, involving and engaging others. That might take a bit more time as the organisation gets larger, but I think the fact that if we can use the crazy compass piece, funding has created a disturbance in the direction for you, both in terms of the organisation's going to grow, but you as a leader need to develop your skills. One of the things that you've been strong about, you've spoken about this today, about mentoring and coaching at various times. There's been points in your career, or indeed points within a role, where things have changed and you're not necessarily sure how to manage them. You've always been a strong advocate for coaching. How has that sort of played out in this role for you?
So it's been something that I've been very lucky to be exposed to throughout my career, in an informal sense, in terms of my chair at TrackSafe that I spoke about. But then in this role, more formally, so probably for the last 6 months, I've worked with Lauren at 𝐬𝐭 as my coach. And I think it's just, as they say, it's lonely at the top. I know it's pretty trite, but it's true. There's a lot of decisions you're making. You've got pressure coming down from the board and then pressure coming up from the team, and you're sort of on your own in the middle. So having someone to just bounce things off, A lot of it is around they hold you accountable. So you can talk about an issue or a conversation you don't want to have, and you know in 2 weeks when you meet with them again, they're going to ask how it went. So part of it is it sort of forces you to push yourself and keep going out of your comfort zone and knowing that there's someone there that you can talk to about it if something does go wrong with it or if you try something and it doesn't work. But I think it's hugely helpful, and I honestly don't know how people go about it without having someone as a coach, because I just think it's such a benefit to have that. And it's also objective, because when you're in it, you're in it. And even people that are around you that are within the organisation have a lot of context, whereas someone that's totally objective will bring that objective viewpoint to whatever challenge you might be talking about. So no, it's pretty critical to my role and leadership.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately for some people, they can see this as a weakness. And I think sometimes the stronger and more confident the leader, the harder it is to seek that help. And, I see that as a significant strength that you have as an individual and in the roles that you bring. You're willing to ask for help. You're willing to say, I don't necessarily know. And to your point, having somebody that's detached from the business but's going to hold you to account can be very, very fulfilling, but also I think just helps overcome that point that I can do this with a little bit of help, not necessarily need all the answers. I can use that person as a sounding board and perhaps rehearse and practice before I do it, but that ultimately makes you a stronger leader because it's a set of skills and a muscle memory that you develop.
And you don't know what you don't know if you're navigating something you haven't done before. I remember I did yoga teacher training a number of years ago now, and as part of the process, we talked about becoming a yoga teacher, and I was saying I don't want to do it because I know I'm not going to be like amazing at it straight away. And they're like, why would you think you would be though? How much practice do you think, how many classes do you think you'd have to teach to become amazing at it? I was like, oh, that's a good point. You can't expect to just step into something and suddenly be incredible at it. You've got to practice. And so with every evolution of leadership or the organisation, there's going to be things I haven't done before or need to navigate that's going to take practice. And then the next time you do it, you're much more confident. But if you've got someone that can help you get from here to there, it's just much more reassuring, and then you can be more confident in your approach because it's not just what you think. It's what someone experienced is also, if you've bounced it off them and they're advising it's a good approach, I think you're then more confident in taking action.
Very good.
That is such a great point to just highlight there, Naomi, that using external coaches or mentors actually helps build your confidence. It's not a sign of lack of confidence. It is an opportunity to expand your horizon. And I like the way you pitched it too, Naomi, because we were talking about it being lonely at the top. But you rephrased that and said, well, actually lonely in the middle, right? I thought that's true, because if you've got a board to report to and then you've got a team who are working for you, right, who have certain expectations, then you are in the middle and you're needing to serve two different audiences. You've got many. So I like that as well. Thank you. So while we're making this personal, if we may, I want to come back to this whole idea of leading with purpose. Now, we're going to make the most of our time with you today because you're also joining us after our podcast at our leadership group we call Leaders at the Loft, and you're our guest speaker today. So thank you. You're really
pleasure.
We're not going to let you go quickly. But so this might help lead into that conversation during our lunch today. But that is, what does leading with purpose actually mean to you? And I want you to reflect on healthy heads in trucks and sheds, the purpose of your organisation, and why is that meaningful for you?
I guess in my point of view, it's a privilege to be able to try to drive a meaningful impact at a scale this large. So I guess you can look at it in terms of helping people one-on-one or one organisation at a time, but to get to try to drive positive improvements to mental health and wellbeing at an industry level through sort of systems change. It's really sort of a privilege to be in that position. And I think that's how you can drive widespread impact. So I guess, in terms of what it means to me to lead with purpose, it's everything we do at Healthy Heads is to try to improve mental health and physical wellbeing of anyone working in our sector. So, it's pretty simple, and it makes it easy for us to make decisions because as we've grown and the brand has become more recognised, more and more people are coming to us to partner with them or do something with them or use our brand for something. But we can then as a team go, does it directly feed into our purpose? And if it doesn't, the answer might be no. Because in the first couple of years, we're like, yes, we'll do anything with anyone. We're trying to get our name out there and grow. Whereas now we're like, actually, our brand has become quite high value. And would this serve us and the people that we're trying to improve the workplace for? And if not, we probably don't have capacity to do it. So in a way, it simplifies decisions because you've got a purpose to attach to. But yeah, I think that's what it means to me.
Thank you.
I think that's really good. And, if I think back to the interview that I took part in when we decided to bring you into Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds, that sense of purpose and that belief in wanting to make a difference was important, led to you getting the role. And then, you've been developing your leadership capabilities since. If we can change gear just slightly, we talk about care for self. Your role takes you to different parts of the country, which means you've got to fly, you've got various hours and things. I know that you love your yoga. Did you find yoga or did yoga find you?
What a great question. I don't know. We found each other, Mark. I tried a few different, my sister kept encouraging me to do it probably 15 years ago. And I was like, I tried a couple of classes and wasn't that into it. And then when I was living in Canberra, I found a studio that I loved. And then it became a real part of my routine. And I can feel it. If I don't go to yoga for 2 or 3 days, I can feel it. And so even when I travel, as you mentioned, and as per your last episode of this podcast about looking after yourself, that to me is absolutely critical. Like as pressure builds and there's more and more coming onto my plate, it becomes more and more important to make time to go and do it. And because yoga is very much about mental health and physical health. So it just gives you time and space to observe what's going on. And when I'm traveling for work, I sometimes can find a studio in a different city. So that's nice to get to explore it. I've done it all over the world. Like I did a yoga class in Germany where it was all in German. So I had to just sort of follow along. But it's something that you can do anywhere, or even just taking 10 minutes to sit down and do some deep breathing is also beneficial. And it's something that I encourage everyone to do. It helps manage stress extremely well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good and grounded answer. You spoke about evolution as a leader and you've spoke about having to adjust as we go forward. By way of example, that even leaders need help. You've made a decision as you move forward in life that you need to do some resistance training as part of what you do, not just the yoga. But you've had to get some help with that, haven't you?
That's true.
You
Absolutely.
can't do it yourself.
Wouldn't do it myself. I hate doing it. I hate lifting weights.
So how have you overcome that?
I've got a trainer that I pay a lot of money to that I see once a week, and I also try to negotiate out of how many reps I have to do and how heavy the weights are. But again, it's an example of recognising something's good for you even if it's challenging, and you need to stick with it.
It is. It is.
Well done. Naomi, it's absolutely been a pleasure speaking with you today. I think everyone who's listening in on this podcast will find your story very relatable and, if I may use the word, authentic, because leadership is a practice. It is a skill. We need to treat it like that. And being able to evolve as a leader and recognise that is something that you want to do and you can do and need to do, and then use the resources you have available to you, not just in the workplace, but also outside of work when you need to look after yourself, is inspiring. And I'm just thrilled to be part of the journey with you. I know Mark and I look on at what you've achieved with admiration and also anticipation of what's coming up ahead. So let's reflect on where we got to on this journey. What's one leadership lesson that you would like listeners to take away from our conversation today? Probably,
And I know it's very simple, but the importance of bringing in people to help you when you need them. Whether it's something informal, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a coach, but that you don't have to go anything alone. And that if you recognise you're out of your depth, bring someone in to help you.
Don't do it all yourself. Wonderful. Naomi, thank you. Mark, I'm going to hand over to you to do something that you do very well, and that's help us summarise the journey we've been on with Naomi.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. Just before I do, Naomi, what's stood out for you the most from today's conversation?
I think it's the importance of stopping and reflecting on where you're at and what you've achieved and what your approach is, because it's not something we often do. You just sort of head down, keep going. But I think there's something to be said for stopping and reflecting on how you're doing things, what's helped you get to here, and what else you might need to get to the next spot.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. So, a couple of things we've covered today. Leadership isn't always about knowing the answers. And as you said, sometimes you need to get somebody to help you with the answers, and that's certainly not weakness. It's about continuing to move forward when the compass is spinning. Things happen internally, externally, that create some spin in the compass, and as a leader, you've got to keep moving forward. Purpose doesn't remove uncertainty, but it gives you something to navigate by, and I think you've given us some good examples of that today. And perhaps the biggest lesson from today's conversation, the best leaders don't wait until they feel completely ready. And I know you were not ready for this conversation today. They step forward, keep learning, and over time discover they were more capable than they first believed. So once again, thank you for joining us. Now, if people would like to know more about Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds, where can they go?
Onto our website, healthyheads.org.au. Lots of resources they can download, including our app.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Naomi, well done.
Thanks, Warren.
And that's a wrap.
Cheers, sir.
And that's another episode of Crazy Compass. We hope today's conversation gave you something practical to think about as you navigate the realities of leadership, business, and change.
Because leadership isn't about always having the answers. Often it's about learning how to pause, reorient, and move forward when the compass starts spinning. And if today's episode resonated with you, we invite you to share it with another leader, business owner, or teammate who might find it valuable too.
And we'd also love to hear from you. If you've got a leadership challenge, a question, or a topic you'd like us to explore in a future episode, simply scan the QR code and send it through. We'll be bringing real leadership questions and real-world situations into future conversations. So thanks for joining us. I'm Warren Howard.
And I'm Mark Parry.
This has been
the Crazy Compass, helping leaders navigate the messy reality of leadership.